This is a story about Mavis the pony. Mavis the pony and the Buzzy bee, to be precise. Mavis lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins very carefully, as Mavis the pony gently put one foot in front of the other. This is a story about Paolo the Cat. Paolo the Cat and the sinking ship, to be precise. Paolo lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins with a lot of preparation. This is a story about Fudge and Lily the kittens. Fudge and Lily the kittens and the naughty tricks, to be precise. Fudge and Lily live in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins with a trick. This is a story about Mr. Johnson the Panda. Mr. Johnson the Panda and the wilting flowers, to be precise. Mr. Johnson lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins one very bright morning. The sun was shining, as it had been for the last few weeks. It was turning out to be a glorious summer. Poppy the tiger was sitting out in her garden, wearing her favorite sunglasses. Colleen the cow was lying in the little field outside her house, watching the birds fly by. Camille the crocodile was splashing about in her paddling pool. Everyone was loving the sunshine. Well, this is a story about Wee Reg the puppy. Wee Reg the puppy and the butterflies, to be precise. Wee Reg lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins with a search. Paolo the cat was searching through a bin outside. This is a story about Mrs. Toasty the sheep. Mrs. Toasty the sheep and the new style, to be precise. Mrs. Toasty lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins one very hot summer day in Swelterville Bay. The air was so hot. This is a story about Lenny the octopus. Lenny the octopus and the big cleanup, to be precise. Lenny the octopus lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins with a mid-afternoon jog. This is a story about Floella the fruit bat. Floella the fruit bat and the wondrous night, to be precise. Floella lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins one very hectic day. Town was bustling. This is a story about Tootie the elephant. Tootie the elephant and the sore loser, to be precise. Tootie lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins one bright morning just outside Tea Trunk House. This is a story about Colleen the cow. Colleen the cow and the very clever plan, to be precise. Colleen lives in fluffy gardens. A wonderful place to live. Our story begins in a little field outside Colleen the cow's house, early one breezy morning. This is a story about Mavis the pony. Mavis the pony and the Sniffles, to be precise. Mavis lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins with the Sniffles. Mavis the pony just wasn't feeling quite right. This is a story about Max the zebra. Max the zebra and the sleepless night, to be precise. Max lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins late one evening. It was bedtime. All over fluffy gardens, people were saying good night, getting themselves ready for bed and tucking themselves up for sleep. Camille the crocodile was putting on her pajamas. Mavis the pony was brushing her teeth. Chuckles the chicken was already snoring. This is a story about wee Reg the puppy. Wee Reg the puppy and the rainbow, to be precise. Wee Reg lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins with some bright sunshine. What a lovely day! This is a story about Mindy the Flamingo. Mindy the Flamingo and the Sunburn, to be precise. Mindy lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins with some sand. A lot of sand, actually. Polly the pelican was on the beach. This is a story about Camille the crocodile. Camille the crocodile and the broken forest, to be precise. Camille lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins at the end. The end of summer, that is. Camille the crocodile was out for a walk through the forest. It was beginning to... This is a story about Scoopy the pink rabbit. Scoopy the pink rabbit and the sports day, to be precise. Scoopy lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins with Chuckles the chicken telling everyone it was time to get up. This particular morning, Chuckles was wearing a rather sporty headband. You see, this is a story about Mr. Johnson the panda. Mr. Johnson the panda and the shy penguin, to be precise. Mr. Johnson lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins with a gift. Rex the pig had found a very beautiful flower. This is a story about Colleen the cow. Colleen the cow and the space rock, to be precise. Colleen lives in fluffy gardens, a wonderful place to live. Our story begins with a bump on the head. As Colleen the... This is a story about George the mean yellow dog. George the mean yellow dog and the silly Mosquito, to be precise. George lives in fluffy gardens. A wonderful place to live. Our story begins with an interruption. This is a story about Paolo the Cat. Paolo the Cat and the supermarket, to be precise. Paolo lives in fluffy gardens. A wonderful place to live. Our story begins in a house on Fishdent Street.